typical drill sergeant ordered his men to fall in. The squad, composed of volunteers for the test, responded like well-trained soldiers, immediately and without question. On the drill field, the men obeyed his commands accurately and with precision. A second drill sergeant assumed command. He put the squad through its paces capably. This man also proved to be an able drill sergeant, giving precise commands. 2 hours later, the squad, all except the drill sergeant, now drugged with LSD, again was ordered to fall in. The response was not the same. The squad leader thought it was not necessary for him to dress right. There was much laughter as the group attempted to give expression to inner emotions. This elation was group-supported, and an individual who was separated from the group would show severe disturbance. Notice the volunteer who salutes several times. 5 minutes later, his severe depression caused the medical officers to end his participation in the test. Response and actions of the drill sergeant who did not receive LSD were as before. But in marching, the drugged squad, although starting fairly well, gave a sluggish and ragged performance. After a few minutes, the men found it difficult to obey orders, and soon the results were chaotic. The second drill sergeant, who had performed effectively earlier in the day, was now given command of the squad. He too had received LSD, and he no longer was an effective leader. When an officer ordered the leader to drill the squad, he responded with, "You want them drilled? You drill them." Ordered to leave the field, he refused to go. In answer to a direct question, he said he was capable of drilling the men and was instructed to do so. Minutes later, it was evident that he was unable to carry out his orders, and he was escorted from the field. We have seen some of the effects of LSD. What effect would it have on a vital operation? Further research is required to give us that answer.
LSD tests on entire unwitting populations as well as soldiers. The same government that doesn't hold any of its leaders accountable for obvious crimes against humanity and the American people specifically. The American government that is owned by the Federal Reserve Bank, that is owned by a small group of private banks who happen to own all of the mass media outlets and are affiliated or simply proxy sister companies deep in bed with the military-industrial complex, deep in bed all with one another, including black budget programs that are not even acknowledged to exist. And then you have publicly acknowledged projects such as NASA, which are 100% honest and have never told a lie. It's impossible for NASA to lie, just like it's impossible for Superman to lie, just like it's impossible for the Apollo astronauts to have landed on the moon, just like it's impossible to fly to Mars and set up a semi-permanent settlement. So all NASA can do is fly, but they can never, ever lie. Oh, and they always fly sideways, never straight up, because you know the shortest distance between 2 points is the direction perpendicular to the straight line between the 2 points, right? I think that's how it goes. Escaping the Earth's atmosphere is an exact science that involves going the total opposite direction as the destination and crash landing your Freemasonic cohorts way out into the sea where you can rescue them and give them a nice glass of Tang and a bowl of horse manure to eat right away. I don't know about the rest of you people, but since NASA is indeed part of the government, and the government is known to do nothing but lie, when it comes to furthering their agenda, whether that agenda is publicly acknowledged or not is totally irrelevant. Our population knows exactly diddly squat, just like our Congress knows exactly diddly squat, which is exactly how the power structure wants it. Each little peon in the pyramidal chain of command gets their little payoff in perks, right down to the clueless private who gets to gloat about riding in the simulator and rant on all night about how he might go out into outer space one day, of course to pick up any half-drunk whores left over at the end of the night when the bar calls the last call for alcohol. Of course, Drunky May wouldn't mind getting knocked up by some loudmouthed astronaut like Zip Buzz Dong or whatever, while the vast majority of the people involved with the lie are completely oblivious, and so government agendas that are not publicly acknowledged are called conspiracy theories. 50 years later, they're called tragic mysteries, while, of course, the truth has been known by the average casual observer paying any degree of attention to the facts for the duration of the hoax.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
So if the government is definitely, without a doubt, completely untrustworthy, and in every sense of the word, and NASA is by definition a government agency, and all world military powers have secretly been in collusion, at least since the 1950s when they all signed the Antarctic Treaty, making the southernmost region of the world off limits in terms of free geodetic surveying or frontiering and homesteading, for example, a natural right to all humans, which has been directly removed and violated by the Antarctic Treaty. It is against the laws of God and nature to prohibit the entire world from freely exploring a totally untouched, or supposedly untouched, huge portion of the world. In fact, the Antarctic, as it is called, is for all intents and purposes larger than all other landmasses combined. We're not talking about a little ice cap on the bottom of the globe. That's only at the so-called North Pole in the center of the map. The Antarctic encompasses all of the oceans and land masses of the world. So we're talking about an area that would dwarf any continent by many orders of magnitude. Our world being a stationary plane is a simple fact that has been right in front of our faces for the course of our entire lives. All children are aware that our world is perfectly still, but are systematically convinced, often kicking and screaming, that the false, delusional, nonsensical matrix of reality with the people walking around on planet Earth, stuck to the side of a spinning sphere, never feeling the inertial effects of axial rotation, compounded by orbital rotation, compounded by solar orbital velocities, and constant changes in direction, finally rendered so very preposterous by adding the galactic center's travel through space as a fixed frame of reference, essentially a supermassive black hole being compelled to fly through space whilst keeping all the stars and planets and moons somehow fixed to that frame of reference, as the said orbital satellites often travel in opposite directions as the motion of the galaxy. And in many cases, the said celestial bodies are in specific changes in direction and velocity. It's extremely hard to believe that these theoretical bodies in motion would be compelled to maintain their perfect position in the galactic or solar plane. maintain their perfect position in the galactic or solar plane. Modern astronomy is an outdated system of well-meaning stargazers who drank the Kool-Aid and believed that since they can apparently view spheres in the sky, then therefore we must live on a sphere in the sky. The incomplete logic such as this, to me, is so hilarious, I often find myself rolling on the floor laughing when I read the comments of some of the newest debunkers of the flat earth, who have apparently never studied the flat earth or stationary plane model for a single microsecond. I've put together a few of my favorite debunkings of the flat earth real quick. I'm not going to include names because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but it's important to me that we understand the level of intelligence that we're dealing with, so we'll try to keep things as simple as much as possible, or we'll lose a major portion of any audience after about 10 minutes. So, number 1, you flat earthers are so stupid. You do realize that it's nighttime in China while it's daytime in the United States. How the hell do you retarded, science-denying flat earthers explain that one, huh? This comment is actually more, end quote there. This comment is actually more common than you think. I find this one particularly funny because the author of this comment, pick one, but they have obviously assumed that most people in the world didn't understand that we have day and night here on Earth. His assumption that we didn't understand the problem he was pointing to obviously proves that he was totally under the impression that the rational, civilized world was not aware of a little thing called daytime and its opposite, nighttime. Apparently, the people that make this comment or debunk the flat earth using this logic, apparently, they're geniuses because they disprove the flat earth by mentioning the words day and night. Really, rolling on the floor laughing. So, here's another one. I'm a flight engineer, you effing idiot. I fly around the world all the time, and when we head east, we always end up back where we started eventually, and never flew off the edge of the world when we go east, so you are a moron and the earth is a globe. Now, the flight engineer wasn't nearly as polite as I portrayed in that statement. However, some of my subscribers have asked me to tone down the cussing. They like to have their kids watch some of my videos, so I just, let's just say that the guy wasn't nearly as polite as that. It was actually rather vulgar and pompous in his virtual tone. But again, the flight engineer had never considered the true correct flat earth model, which is 100% typical of all people claiming to debunk the truth, as he would know that east is simply a right angle to north and south, and by making minor course corrections on the flat earth, a plane heading east, maintaining relatively consistent latitude and altitude, will eventually describe a circle on a flat surface. Number 3, here's another one, Columbus. Oh, and I've actually had Harvard professors who were on advisory boards to NASA state this one. Columbus saw the masts of ships appear before the hulls of the ships appeared. So even Columbus, the Freemasonic murderer, knew that we lived on a globe. Ah, yes, good old Columbus. Christopher Cologne, the man who single-handedly discovered America when he was looking for India, just like Al Gore invented the internet. And I just discovered your bank account and your house, plus the beer in your fridge and the leftover lasagna. Oh, it's not homemade lasagna? Well, then get your wife downstairs to cook me some lasagna from scratch right now. I mean, I discovered your house and all this lasagna, and I discovered your wife, so that's mine. Now, tell that woman to fix my some lasagna now. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so you know what? I think I just discovered your wife, so she's mine now. And I'm going to chop off your hands and string you up to the kids' swing set out back. I'm Christopher Columbus, and I discovered your house and your wife, and even your lasagna was discovered by me, so it's mine, because I'm Christopher Columbus. And I was sent to India to claim houses in lasagna for the Queen of Spain. So all of that aside, if you study the vertical lines, such as the masts of large ships, how they behave as they increase their distance from your eye, when the top of the mast goes beyond the vanishing point of the hull, it creates an optical illusion due to the vanishing point of the hull being closer to you, the observer, line of sight, say 6 feet above the sea level. So it's very laughable, preposterous, and easily debunked once you do realize the truth about the world, and if you understand the true laws of perspective. We've all been brought up to accept that the most bizarre and asinine theoretical model of the world has been true and correct, but that isn't even the start of it. You see, along with teaching the 5- and 6-year-old students, and often younger students, unfortunately has been revealed to be a complete lie, just like everything else official, causing so many loopholes even the most avid roller coaster enthusiast would vomit at the sight of. This is truly the case, however, we've been tricked by a pretty facade. And just speaking of things official real quick, it's very difficult to stay clear of the 9/11 tangent in any discussion because so much of our modern situation is a result of the events which unfolded just over 14 years ago, actually. Even the so-called Christian music industry has been co-opted by psychopathic, Kabbalistic, profit-driven, profit as in money, not as in prophetic. And so, really, I mean, there's no argument I can think of against the notion that basically all spheres of power and influence in our world have been overrun or co-opted, or at least are in the process of it, if not totally overrun. So, when you take totally unproven theorems such as evolution and gravity and teach them as fact when they are in reality theoretical impossibilities that have been completely debunked, very recently, in fact, proving that the entire world has been successfully misled into firmly believing in a totally contrived model of the universe where our awesome and unique world on the ground, our world has no rival in the cosmos that comes close to the significance of Earth. The world is magnificent in its massive scope and diversity of life and terrain, a stationary plane around which all the celestial bodies orbit. The only stationary plane in all of existence as far as we can see. The celestial bodies going in orbit in great circles concentric with the North Pole overhead. Absolute truth or absolute righteousness are replaced with the moral and intellectual cop-out of all things being relative, including the opposing ideas of right and wrong, or good and evil, as two primal examples of how relativism theoretically excuses us from the consequences of, doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. Well, nature has a way of balancing things out. It's called karmic justice. But if you do the right thing, good things will come to you. And if you do the wrong thing, it will be, paid back to you tenfold. And that's just the way it works. But one of the tenets of Satanism or the occult in general is that there is no moral absolute, or there are no moral absolutes. And if your plans involve questionable or even despicable or anti-human, totally unrighteous atrocities, then you're somehow justified by your religion, which is your free choice here in America. But you're justified by the notion that any action can be justified as morally acceptable if the proper amount of pre-programming and dehumanization of the enemy is conducted, repeated, and spread across imagination land, also known as the conventional paradigm, which most people believe to be indisputable, true, and correct, although they have never properly scrutinized the topic at hand, be it the sphere Earth, ridiculous theory of evolution, which asserts that our species was developed over millions of years of competing chimpanzees or orangutan, gradually morphing into modern man. This myth that has been dispelled completely, much like the globe Earth lie has been dispelled completely, yet it continues to be taught in all schools. The Luciferian-controlled federal education system, which has been designed over the years to ensure the entire population completely misunderstands just about all of physical science and history, and gives them awards or scholarships and futures for conforming to the conventional paradigm even more stringently than the next chap over. Beyond this, the mind-controlled slave living on prison planet Earth will often move on to college, where they might, become an astrophysicist, old enough to be taught the lie programmed into the minds of the gullible children of the world, who grow up to be the irrational non-thinkers for the world, vehemently denying the natural observations of all children. The common reaction that people execute when they are first presented with the actual verified facts surrounding our world's lack of motion and curvature. It's 1,000% typical to have a person without a single clue as to what we're talking about try to challenge the theory or challenge the truth or debunk the truth with some often repeated nonsensical lie. I challenge all my subscribers to choose one single person, if you haven't already done this, but just choose one single person, either a random stranger, say in a bar setting, or at a casual sports bar, or whatever, at the mall. Find a random stranger, or even a person in your family or circle of friends who you care about. Just one person. Just pick a person and confront them with the evidence in such a way as I did a moment ago. Don't say, hey, bro, it's a flat earth, because that's only going to set you back. But again, say something, calmly and rationally like, hey, did you hear the news about the world being a stationary plane? And NASA has been caught lying to the world since its very inception? Now, most people will ask, what the does that mean? What are you talking about, Beavis? And then you can say, dude, our world is flat and stationary. It's been proven. But at least if you approach them initially with a rational question about verified news, just because it's not on MSN or Fox doesn't not make it news. I submit the mainstream outlets are actually the opposite of what the press was intended to be, or the opposite of news. The free press was intended to be the perpetual watchdog for the people, an unwritten fourth branch of government which was supposed to hold public officials accountable.
The advanced one. I love that. That's adorable. So we had a little debate this morning.
We did. Did you see how he put his toilet paper roll? He put it
over.
I believe the proper way to do it, and the way it should be done, and the only way it should be done, is under. It's easier and much more accessible. Over is confusing. Under, look how easy. Oh, look how easy it is. Anyway.
Well,
this is the cheap toilet paper.
You're clear.
All right, firing.
Line here. What's the state line? Let me know when you gather. What shoot? Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260. Come on, fire.
Roger.
over.
Yeah, show.
But initially,
but show what you did.
You can be able to see. I folded it nicely.
Of course, she did. It's hard to tell, but there are little creases.
And then you put a little thing on it.
She put a sticker. See.
Bushman development. Copy at White 6. That's a weapon.
Yeah. Hotel 26, crazy horse 18.
We'll call for change. You're clear.
All right, firing.
Line here. What's the state line? Let me know when you gather. What shoot? Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Yeah, Roger.
Bring it on, Brittany. A while back, we took her to task on America's Newsroom for some X-rated lyrics in her new song, and now the Queen of Pop appears to be calling us out. Back in January, we put her song, If You Seek Amy, on the docket of Kelly's court after the Parents Television Council demanded that song get restricted play. The title line, really just the F word spelled out in disguise. And now comes the music video.
I seriously question an increase in the Pentagon budget in the face of the department's recent Inspector General's report. How can we seriously consider a $50 billion increase in the defense budget when DOD's own auditors say the department cannot account for $2.3 trillion in transactions in 1 year alone.
Check out the anchor and the show name on the bottom right. Sound and look familiar? Roll it.
If you seek Amy.
If you seek Amy. Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Doesn't make any sense, does it?
It's like an MTV video.
Whoever could they be
I like
referring to? Britney Spears turns out to be a faithful America's Newsroom watcher, just like all of you. Who'd have thunk it?
It is, I was going to say terrifying. It is such a monumental task. I have met with two former officials of the Pentagon who served in the budget and controller and those areas. And I've mused over the fact that I've read some of these things and asked what they thought.
It's preposterous that the Defense Department doesn't know what's happened to this money.
This situation's a disgrace. It tells me that we can't meet our constitutional obligations to the taxpayers of our country to make sure that things are honestly and legally spent.
What do you think? Did she take a shot at moi? I think so. Bring it, Brittany.
What was the tagline?
Come on.
What's the tagline?
Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense.
We have invited Britney Spears to come on this program. Showdown.
There we go.
Tuned.
All right, before we go, we found a woman who has nothing but a great time.
I think it's going to take a period of years to sort it out, and I think it'll probably take the cooperation of the Congress to try to get the system so that you can actually manage the financial aspects of that institution rather than simply report on things that have happened imperfectly.
It is an incredible thing that we arm the world and then turn around and come to Congress and say, look at all these weapons out there. They're almost superior to ours. They're comparable to ours. Well, of course they are. They're ours. We sold them to them.
So they wanted to show their kids how to do it.
I love that song by Taco Bell.
Anyway, so he wanted to do it through social media. So check out how he teaches them to change a toilet paper.
And there's more that keep walking by, and one of them has a weapon. Roger, receive,
The free press was intended to be the perpetual watchdog for the people, an unwritten fourth branch of government which was supposed to hold public officials accountable for their actions and was intended to keep the public informed as to world events. Of course, over time, the mainstream media outlets have become merged into just a small handful of 5 or 6 companies that own all the major media outlets, including the big budget movie companies and music labels, all of the, quote unquote, conflicting news stations, for example, Fox and MSN, are for all intents and purposes owned by the same group of people, via proxy, of course, at the very upper echelons of the power structure where all of these mega banks converge. News is supposed to be the factual, important, accurate information that questions what our elected officials are doing and scrutinizes their actions in terms of performance in office, or to blow the whistle on obviously unconstitutional decrees such as the Patriot Act or Jade Helm. The media is silent about this because the media is owned by the same group of people who are above the political system and above the monetary system and above the military-industrial complex, and these very few people have twisted the unwritten fourth branch of government, which is supposed to be a network of intelligent, skeptical, vocal observers of the operations of government, with the prime directive of keeping the population, the true rulers of this republic, in the loop, and would necessarily hold any public official's feet to the fire should they display corrupt or treasonous behavior. A lot of people don't realize this, but treason is a very strong offense and is often punishable by death even to this day. Our U.S. military has taken a solemn oath to defend our once great, now fallen nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic, Isn't that odd that such an oath is taken by our overwhelmingly decent soldiers, and it is therefore our military's first and foremost duty to protect the American people, while the vast majority of our military forces are spread out all over the world, policing this area, financially terrorizing that area, bombing this other area, spying on these guys, trying to get deals from those guys, always greasing the palms to get favors. You know how politics works, and of course the military is just the guard dogs or the the force behind the politics. But the news outlets were intended to disseminate the truth throughout the population. And while the world media was in decades past a vast assortment of different companies and cooperatives, independent businesses with sharp entrepreneurs and skilled writers and researchers, talented editors and producers with the goal of scrutinizing our servant class governmental workers, but most importantly, we had a diversity of such independent sources of information and competition in terms of sleuthing and independent journalism. The politicians of 100 years ago were held to far higher standards in terms of fulfilling their campaign oaths or promises, and this has dwindled down to the point where campaign oaths amount to something out of Animal House. Picture John Belushi stating, "If you elect me, free kegs for everyone, and we'll all get A's."
I gave my love a cherry that had no stone. I gave my love a chicken that had no bones. I gave my love a story that had no end. I give...
As we all know that a campaigning president is by definition a president which is lying and pandering to become president, telling people exactly what their polling data tells them that particular group of people wants to hear. And fast forward to 2015, and even the free press, the unwritten fourth branch of government, in the past has been comprised of the brightest writers and sharpest independent investigators with the sole purpose of keeping tabs on our elected officials, the servants of the people, along with the wittiest columnists, most cunning entrepreneurs, and finally, even they have been bought out, co-opted, and merged into the mega conglomerate that converges with all other hierarchical structures of power in the world. And as a side note, I submit the garbage found on TV and modern mega films are nowhere near as fulfilling or enjoyable or educational as most of the work done by individual independent filmmakers on YouTube. So I think, that's an interesting observation to make, how, media was once filled with lots of different independent entities. They all converged into one conglomerate, and now we have, an even more diverse sample of independent entities producing content. So, way to go, YouTube. At any rate, in order for a normal, sane, rational person to simply consider the evidence that we're pointing to in terms of the world being a stationary plane, one must first break the programming, which is sort of a catch-22. However, we can get past it if we can get the person's attention for a moment and demonstrate right quick how preposterous and nonsensical the spherical Earth heliocentric model actually is. When you come to realize this, the same point applies to all of the people calling themselves scientists. It's a rather depressing and ironic fact, but it's unfortunately the plain truth. So, in other words, even the scientists must break the programming. And I should say, actually, especially the scientists need to break the programming because they're in it far deeper than the average Joe. Science is supposed to be an unbiased, unbridled quest for ultimate truth, testing any and all hypotheses to verify their validity, scrutinize all aspects of a subject using repeatable logical experiments, and ultimately prove or alternately discredit any premise. We must always use keen observation and repeatable experiments to prove or disprove one premise or another. Discarding hypotheses which do not jive with reality is the most important step in the process. However, if you remove the ability for an entire world full of people to see reality as it truly is, science is a rather noble and pure concept in its idealistic, if naive, form. We're led to believe that science is a course of study and an ever-expanding, compounded body of vast knowledge and correctness, and ultimately truth that gets bigger and bigger, better and better as the years go by. Each subsequent leap in science is apparently a huge advance above and beyond its measly predecessors.
The science delusion is the belief that science already understands the nature of reality in principle, leaving only the details to be filled in. This is a very widespread belief in our society. It's the kind of belief system of people who say, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. It's a belief system which has now been spread to the entire world. But there's a conflict in the heart of science between science as a method of inquiry based on reason, evidence, hypothesis, and collective investigation, and science as a belief system or a worldview. And unfortunately, the worldview aspect of science has come to inhibit and constrict the free inquiry, which is the very lifeblood of the scientific endeavor. Since the late 19th century, science has been conducted under the aspect of a belief system or worldview, which is essentially that of materialism, philosophical materialism. And these sciences are now wholly owned subsidiaries of the materialist worldview. I think that as we break out of it, the sciences will be regenerated. What I do in my book, The Science Delusion, which is called Science Set Free in the United States, is take the 10 dogmas or assumptions of science and turn them into questions, seeing how well they stand up if you look at them scientifically. None of them stand up very well. What I'm going to do is first run through what these 10 dogmas are, and then I'll only have time to discuss one or two of them in a bit more detail. But essentially, the 10 dogmas, which are the default worldview of most educated people all over the world, are first that nature is mechanical or machine-like. The universe is like a machine, animals and plants are like machines, we're like machines. In fact, we are machines. We're lumbering robots, in Richard Dawkins' vivid phrase, with brains that are genetically programmed computers. Second, matter is unconscious. The whole universe is made up of unconscious matter. There's no consciousness in stars, in galaxies, in planets, in animals, in plants, and there ought not to be any in us either, if this theory is true. So a lot of the philosophy of mind over the last 100 years is trying to prove that we're not really conscious at all.
I just went through a whole week. I was at TED. I'm a TED fellow this year, and I went through a whole week of people telling me what to do, where to be, and it was like being at a fucking Scientology summer camp. It was horrible.
Yeah, tell me what the fuck happened. They told you that you can't leave?
Yeah, like before you go, they're like, you need to participate in TED. You need to be there. I'm like, all right, cool. Like I figure like minds are reasonable. If you have to do something in LA, you can go do something in LA.
Right.
I gave them like 4 or 5 days of my time. Like, I was there every single 13 hours. Like every day they have 13 hours of fucking activities they have mapped out for you. Some days like 15, 16 hours, right? If you go to their after events. And I was like, that's way too much fucking human interaction.
5 days.
Okay,
Yeah.
explain this. So you go there and you're going to go and do your own TED speech, right?
Yeah.
So you do your own TED speech. What is the other stuff they have for you?
They want you to be available for like networking, cocktail events, like attendees want to talk to you. You need to be available. And I was like, look, I've done a lot. Like I put people on, like I put them in touch with ad agency people. I put them in touch with other people to do business with, other artists. I was introducing everyone. And I thought I was good. So I went yesterday to go do DVD Asa. I went up, met up Cho, I met up Asa. And I went, and now they called me today on the way over here. And they were like, we're taking your TED fellowship away. I was like, why are you taking the TED fellowship? Like, because you went to L.A. I was like, you're in Long Beach. I just went to L.A. for the afternoon to do the fucking podcast. You're fucking crazy. And they're like, you took this spot from somebody who would have gone to every talk and been in everything. I was like, yo, the other people weren't there for everything, but you're also just crazy. Like, you're fucking crazy.
You're crazy. But they're not paying you.
No, they don't pay.
That's insane.
That's
You go to do
insane,
it for the
dude.
love, and they want you for 7 days, 12 to 15 hours a day.
What?
And you can't just leave to go do something, some work that you have to do.
Yeah.
That's fucked.
Wait a minute.
They make you room with people.
Wait a minute. Why? How can they do that? How
They
can they
were-
tell you who to sleep with?
Yeah, they were, yes. And they were like, you have to room, it's part of the TED experience. And I was like, this is a cult. At this point, you have crossed the threshold. You are now fucking Scientology.
Yeah.
How big
And
is the hotel?
It's a small, shitty hotel. It's the Hyatt Regency. It looks like a fucking airport hotel in Long
So
Beach.
you're like in the bed next to this guy.
Yeah.
So you had to hear each other snore.
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
The fuck
Yes.
out of here.
What the
Yes.
fuck is that?
And they also hold this shit at Long Beach, and it's like next to...
It's part of the TED experience,
It
Eddie.
is part of the TED experience.
Eddie,
Just
it's
get
part of the TED experience.
owned. To
I
get
can't
pawned.
believe that no one's talked about this before, because this seems like straight up Boy Scouts.
Yeah. You know what is the thing is most people, they need TED. They need TED to put you on. They want the cosign. And most people, it's like, if you do something for me, I won't say anything about you. But that's, I mean, I think, Joe, you're the same way. I don't give a fuck what you do for me. If you're a fucking weirdo and you're about to start some new cult conference religion, I'm going to say something. They send packets, too, to be like, this is how to network with billionaires.
Wow.
Like how to go to
How
a
to network with billionaires.
Yeah, how to go to a network and talk to people and like talk to potential people who could collaborate and work with you. They're like, don't just go ask them for money. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Oh my
like,
God!
Common
Don't
sense shit
just
is
go
wild.
ask them for money, and it's
Yeah.
in the packets. All they represent is a distribution method for the greatest minds on earth.
Yeah.
That's all they represent. It's not that they are the greatest minds on earth.
Yeah.
It's just there's so many interesting people today. We live in an amazing time, and
Yeah.
just when you good something like TED, whatever that TED stands for, it became synonymous on the internet with fascinating talks. It didn't work out because you're not willing to be a fucking slave and sleep in a hotel room with a stranger for a week.
Yeah.
That's insane.
They had me. I rehearsed for 2 days. I fucking did the talk. I did everything I'm supposed to do, and then I was like, I'm gonna just peace out for like a half day, and they bugged.
Wow, that's crazy, and the
is
fact
crazy.
that they don't pay you, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You guys need to do a Vice show exposing TED, how
what you
loony
do.
TED is.
I told Vice that. I
What did
told them
Vice
that
say?
before I got booted. I sent them an email like, yo, you got to see this shit. It's like the beginnings of Scientology.
Wow, it is so true that once people have a position of power and influence, and people want to be a part of them, people go corrupt.
Yo, they do shit like you should give a standing ovation when this person comes. You should do this and that. It's
What?
crazy. Yeah. It's
Wait a
wild.
minute. Fake standing ovations?
Yeah, and they were also saying, like, you know, when the founder comes, Chris Anderson comes, like, you don't have to give him a standing ovation. Like, you know, it's nice if you want to, but he doesn't actually need you to do it. I'm like, the fact that you needed to give me this fake halfway disclaimer is so fucking strange.
Wow, that's
It's
so
so strange.
bizarre.
Yeah.
They tell you who to and not to
Yeah.
give standing ovations to. Who's
And
a
you
must?
have to apply. You have to apply to go to TED to attend, and then once you're accepted, you pay $8,000.
What?
That's a mind fuck.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You had to pay?
No, hell no, I didn't
But
pay.
the people
I was
who
like,
do
the
it, they
people that
apply.
attend, like,
Okay, so the
yeah.
people that attend, these strict audience members, you're saying. Okay.
You gotta want to be so down so bad to do that, to go through an application process and then fucking pay.
That's a lot of money.
That's
How
a
many
lot of
people are
bread.
going? How many people go?
I don't know. I think like 2,000, 3,000.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's a lot of money they make.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
They make off of you.
Yeah.
2,000 people paying $8,000 is how much.
Yeah.
And I didn't even bother
Ask
counting.
a Asian,
I listened
Joe.
to you.
Ask a Asian.
Always. I'm asking Asians from now on.
Pretty
Jamie,
sure it's 16 million in my
Jamie,
head.
you silly bitch.
Although each step in the process is not necessarily to reach the end result. Theoretical physics, which should certainly not be classified as a science, but more akin to a religion or at best a philosophy, theoretical physics is so far removed from physical reality or the scientific method specifically, we simply cannot, by definition, call a theoretical physicist such as Josh Grindley or Neil deGrasse or, Einstein a scientist. Each individual person must not stop considering never-ending piles of empirical, irrefutable evidence which is totally contrary to the doctrine of rotundity, and skeptically scrutinizing every last so-called proof of a globe will always lead the observer to the same conclusion. I would also like to extend a huge thanks to YouTube right quick for lifting the totally bogus copyright strike from my account, which had falsely been slung my way by the producers of the Art Bell Show, who claimed to have copyright ownership of my voice on a debate which I was invited to participate in, which was not actually a debate, but was certainly within my copyright ownership just as it was theirs. Furthermore, my remix of the debate, which was the focus of the copyright strike, was obviously well within the laws of the Fair Use Act, and was indeed a fresh look and a parody of the original subject matter, which was my voice in the first place on a debate which I was not paid to participate in, nor did I sign away any of my rights to copyright ownership of my own voice. At any rate, YouTube has done the noble thing and lifted the copyright strike, and so the remix of the debate is now back up on my YouTube channel, featured as of 9/29/15 on the welcome page to my channel. So thank you, YouTube, for being totally fair and totally awesome. Now, with that being said, the time has come for the world to simply consider the truth. The truth is, science as we understand it to be an intense and rational, skeptical, unbiased mechanism with high standards of integrity, carefully developed over the course of history with the sole purpose of discerning the ultimate truth in all things physical, notwithstanding our limited capacity to understand or even register all things physical, which essentially render us mostly blind and deaf. However, we do have the ability to discern certain things by the power of deduction. Now, for example, the majority of light and sound frequencies are totally imperceptible to the naked human eye or ear, respectively. We can use gadgets to see beyond the visible light spectrum, or gadgets which produce or detect sounds inaudible to the human ear, yet have often the same effects on people. Just as an example of inaudible sound frequencies having an effect on us people, non-lethal, quote, crowd control devices which use ultrasonic waves to basically stun entire masses of people with frequencies of sound totally inaudible to the human ear. So how is it that some elements or forces of nature can be totally undetectable by the person and affect the person subjected to the said hidden stimuli? Is it possible that we are simply unable to detect or register much of true reality, and our capacity to understand many things is inhibited by our physical nature, and specifically inhibited by what we understand to be possible or impossible as well? So in other words, it's not necessarily what we can sense, see, hear, or taste, but it is also largely about what we understand to be possible or impossible. That governs our view of reality in many, many cases. We're taught to believe that scientists are always honorable, truthful, unbiased cross-section of our world community, somehow immune to the trappings and coercive nature of the power structures built into our hierarchically structured elements of our modern society. Now encompassing the entire world stage, manipulating all levers of power and influence for all intents and purposes, we're taught to assume that scientists rely strictly on data, never conjecture to base their assertions or conclusions, and will simply never endorse a theory or a law of physics that isn't supported by empirical, indisputable, repeatable evidence. This is an extremely naive position to take, and it's abundantly clear that hierarchical institutions are inherently corruptible, including the scientists who are just as concerned with, if not more so concerned with, fitting in or herd mentality, as they are concerned about uncovering the ultimate truth. Scientists, just like everyone else, by definition, must conform to the conventional paradigm and must also rely on passing tests which gauge their ability to conform to and regurgitate the details of the accepted paradigm. And let's not forget the financial aspects of science. They gotta eat too. And as most building contractors will go after the money, scientists must ultimately follow the funding, and in some cases conform to ideals which may or may not jive with their stance on a topic, as funding to simply do their research and survive in the world is far too important than simple moral integrity, especially when you consider the majority of scientists are not exactly the God-fearing types who, in terms of the average person's ideals and moral compass, gotta have cash to pay the bills, which of course applies to scientists who apparently concern themselves more with adhering to the accepted paradigm than they do with ever seeking the ultimate truth in all things physical or even metaphysical. The widely accepted one, however, the obvious truth, which is self-evident and verifiable by anyone who cares to consider its bizarre conspiracy theory, how upside down is that? The ironic part of this whole thing is the bizarre, totally nonsensical theory is the widely accepted one. However, the obvious truth, which is self-evident and verifiable by anyone who cares to consider it, is considered to be the bizarre conspiracy theory. How upside down is that? Now, as a glaring case in point, to illustrate the notion that I'm getting at here, a quick lesson in sodium fluoride. Sodium fluoride is a poison. It's a neurotoxin. It's a toxic byproduct of aluminum manufacturing. The super rich, super connected movers and shakers of the industrial world, an associated group of aluminum manufacturers from across the world, had a bit of a dilemma. See, it was all the damn sodium fluoride. Sodium fluoride, or simply fluoride, again, is a toxic, poisonous substance which is extremely hard to contain and even more difficult to safely dispose of according to certain ecological standards. Fluoride disposal was an extremely costly factor of doing business as an aluminum manufacturer due to the costs and liabilities associated with the safe storage and legally adherent disposal of the toxic byproduct. So this was a major problem to a corporation beholden strictly to their own bottom line and to perpetual growth for their stockholders. So the aluminum manufacturers came up with an extremely ingenious, albeit insidious, plan to solve this cost-benefit problem in terms of sodium fluoride dispersal. You first must understand that, like the World Bank cartels, there is a worldwide network of secret societies that span the globe and have sworn to help out one another. And while apparently on the surface to the uninitiated, these groups are unrelated, organizations or even individuals, they're unrelated, but are secretly making backdoor deals and secret arrangements within the confines of their Masonic lodges and their satanic lodges or similar summits, such as the widely known Bilderberg conferences or the Council on Foreign Relations meetings, which are constitutionally illegal and reprehensible, as our elected leaders have no business dealing in secret with international bodies or international leaders, possibly foreign enemies, possibly domestic enemies, and should be impeached on these counts alone. Unfortunately, the population has been dumbed down to the point where we believe we are subservient to the government, but I'm sort of straying away from the topic here. Sorry. Okay, so the aluminum manufacturers put together a group of select scientists, dentists exactly, to comprise an official dental think tank or association of the most prestigious dentists of their time, or possibly the most easily controlled or persuaded to agree for one reason or another dentists of their time, or more likely proud apron-wearing members of the lodge dentists of their time, certainly the best connected or most highly esteemed and honorable dentists of their time, but we'll just call them the brightest dentists of the day, or ultimately you can call them what they formed, which is called the American Dental Association, a very official sounding group of dentists from the, Ivy League schools, ultimately created with the specific purpose of endorsing and promoting the use of fluoride as a safe, effective means to keeping our teeth cavity-free, and even include the poisonous fluoride in most municipal and city water supplies for the same purpose. If you look on the back of a tube of toothpaste with an active ingredient as fluoride, notice the poison control warning on the back of the tube in the small print, never on the front of the packaging, of course, but quoting from a popular name brand toothpaste tube, quote, active ingredient sodium fluoride 0.24%, and it supposedly, quote, aids in the prevention of tooth decay, end quote. Now, if you read the warnings, if more than used for brushing is accidentally swallowed, get medical help or contact a poison control center right away. Other fun facts on the same tube are directions. Do not swallow. And if you consider a, quote, pea-sized drop is the amount recommended for brushing, simply swallowing a single ounce of toothpaste could potentially poison you. If you consider our drinking water is all laced with the same exact fluoride, how can we avoid calling the Poison Control Center every time we follow the health guidelines of drinking 1 ounce of drinking water for every 2 pounds of weight? So, for example, I weigh about 175 pounds. I should be drinking about, a little less than 90 ounces of water a day. 10 9-ounce glasses of water every day. Now, if you look at the parts per million on your water bill of fluoride, it's rather frightening to realize that we're consuming enough toxic fluoride on a regular basis if we follow the guidelines according to the health officials. But we're swallowing enough fluoride on a regular basis to necessitate calling poison control fairly frequently. Now, furthermore, neurotoxins tend to build up in our bodies as our natural immune systems were not designed or intended to cope with man-made toxic byproducts not found in nature. So, sodium fluoride is obviously a poison. The proof that it prevents tooth decay or cavities is anecdotal at best. It is indeed an outdated study done by a compromised group of dentists who were on the take of the uber-rich aluminum manufacturers who were, even then at the early 20th century, connected to these private banks. Now, when you have a group of prestigious, highly esteemed Ivy Leaguer dentists parading sodium fluoride as the magic bullet for tooth decay, plus you have the official sounding American Dental Association, a proxy group secretly funded and set up by the aluminum manufacturers, paying out dividends to private dentists to endorse or recommend sodium fluoride to their patients, with their recommendations based on seemingly legitimate data backed by the ADA, the American Dental Association. What incentive would a typical small-town dentist of that time have to disagree with the brightest minds in dentistry and refuse the bonus payments for following the herd and endorsing fluoride as well? A dentist would have to be stupid not to go along with it, And many of the private dentists simply had no motivation or funding or any reason whatsoever to try and verify or replicate or debunk the findings of the American Dental Association.
Everyone's heard of fluoride, but what exactly is it and how does it work to prevent cavities? Fluoride is actually found naturally in rocks, soil, and water. It's a chemical ion of the element fluorine. It's a chemical ion of the element fluorine.
It's a chemical ion. It's a chemical ion. It's a chemical ion of the element fluorine.
It's a chemical ion. It's a chemical ion.
It's a chemical ion of the element fluorine.
The 13th most abundant element in the Earth's crust. An ion is a positively or negatively charged atom that helps elements combine with each other. Fluoride is a negatively charged ion that doesn't normally exist by itself. Instead, it combines with positively charged ions like sodium to make some of the ingredients that are found in your toothpaste.
It's an absurdity to me to put a developmental neurotoxin into the drinking water when the evidence is complete. It is a developmental neurotoxin. Now, all the evidence is there that fluoride is a developmental neurotoxin. It decreases IQ in children of up to 10 points. And there are 33 studies on record now, peer-reviewed, good science studies that show fluoride in the amounts that's used in water fluoridation does reduce IQ in children, and that it is a developmental neurotoxin.
So many decades later, we're still brushing our teeth with poison and allowing the aluminum manufacturers to simply dump sodium fluoride into our drinking water supplies and our toothpaste, turning a costly liability of aluminum manufacturing into a lucrative fringe benefit of slick, totally inhuman corporate heads of the aluminum manufacturing conglomerates who are again in bed with, at the very top, with the large banking conglomerates. So this is a perfect example to point to of how the scientific, unbiased medical doctors who are sworn to heal people can be totally snowed into endorsing a poisonous product, none the wiser to the long-term effects of repeated fluoride use by the general population over long-term, periods, which was originally introduced into the water supplies of concentration camps during World War II, as the neurotoxin fluoride tends to make people more docile or more easily controlled. I've also seen compelling evidence that ingesting fluoride over time calcifies the pineal gland, which is our third eye, or literally the part of our brain that allows us to visualize or imagine 3D images, and is arguably what causes our vision during dream state, as our eyes are obviously closed at that time, so whatever we see in our dreams is being seen from within the matrix of our own mind, and absolutely must be produced in the pineal gland, since it has most of the same nerve types and functionality as our real eye. So the thing about neurotoxins, as well as hazards such as lead and mercury and fluoride and arsenic, is that they tend to build up in our systems as we are unable to process them out of our systems naturally via the liver and other natural defenses our bodies have against, naturally occurring toxins. In other words, brushing your teeth a few times ever with fluoride probably won't harm you that much, but a lifetime of brushing thrice per day could have detrimental neurological effects, which have never adequately been studied or even addressed, since the ADA originally held the position that it's safe and good for your health, which remains their current professional stance on the matter. On a related side note, I mentioned lead as another neurotoxin which has actually been stricken from all paints and even pencils. The conventional narrative on lead is that it was removed from our readily available usages of it in paint and pencils, something that we certainly don't ingest or are not supposed to be put into the mouth due to its toxic nature. But this leaves me scratching my head about why lead would be removed from items which are certainly not intended for consumption. Of course, you'll get the 1 per 1,000 child who will eat the paint chips or chew on their pencil. However, dentists recommend fluoride, which is also a neurotoxin, while the government prohibits the use of lead and even paint for our houses. Now, it's known that lead will make the lifespan of the paint job like 10 times longer. I mean, if you put a coat of lead-based paint on your house, it's going to last forever. The crap that you buy today in the stores, which is non-lead based paint, you got to repaint every 5 or 10 years. But it's well known that Superman cannot see through lead.
You diseased maniac. Do you really think you could hide it from me by encasing it in lead? I'll mold this box into your prison bars. Don't touch that.
However, that's sort of besides the point. Lead is a known deterrent for radio frequency waves, so it's possible that lead was removed from paints, not so much so that Superman couldn't see into our house, but also not so much for our protection or safety, but for some other reason. Maybe it's not to keep, Superman from not being able to see into our house, but could it be that we are more easily spied upon by Big Brother when you remove the lead from the paint that once coated all of our homes? Just food for thought, but it makes a lot of sense if you go down that rabbit hole and consider that fluoride, a neurotoxin, is encouraged by dentists, yet lead, a neurotoxin, is totally illegal in our paints. At any rate, fluoridation of our water and toothpaste for any indirect third party, the aluminum manufacturers, had motivation to push fluoride as a safe and logical product for dental use is just one glaring example of how science is not the naive estimation as this unbiased beacon of truth, totally immune to corruption or the trappings of the secular world we know so well. Yes, unfortunately, even science has been taken over or co-opted by the very same Kabbalistic, anti-Christian, anti-human, secretive, and deceptive elements of our society, which have left their signature upon all spheres of power and influence which exist in our modern world. The very seats of power and influence which the checks and balances built into the American Republic were intended to prevent have been subverted by slick lawyers and ultimately allowed to occur thanks to a sound asleep general population who believe the government is the official and only source of all truth, the omnipotent ruler of America, and Americans are servants to the government, or bass backwards ignoramuses who are a topic for another discussion. Suffice to say that the types of people who have the left brain dominant, all logic, no creativity tendencies will often make great doctors, often make great politicians, and often make great psychopaths.
Jumping off point where you begin to wonder if maybe actually doing it will give you that which is beyond just reading about it or looking at it.
Ted, after you committed your first murder, what was the emotional effect on you? What happened in the days after that?
It was like coming out of some kind of horrible trance or dream. I can only liken it to after, I don't want to over-dramatize it, but to have been possessed by something so awful and so alien, and then the next morning wake up from it, remember what happened, and realize that basically, in the eyes of the law, certainly in the eyes of God, you're responsible. To wake up in the morning and realize what I had done, and with a clear mind and all my essential moral and ethical feelings intact at that moment, absolutely horrified that I was capable of doing something.
Often make great politicians and often make great psychopaths, but the same archetype is typically not prone to believing in a higher power or thinking outside the pre-approved, pre-scripted, accepted paradigm, which they have conformed to completely by their very definition as doctors. Again, their highest attribute is also their greatest weakness in many regards, as it's difficult to prove to an intelligent person that they have been fooled for their entire life. In fact, it's easier to fool a person than it is to convince a person that he's been fooled. So, changing gears a bit here, when the Japanese supposedly sneak attacked Pearl Harbor during World War II for no strategic reason whatsoever,
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The Japanese supposedly sneak attacked Pearl Harbor during World War II for no strategic reason whatsoever, only to bring America into the war, which the American people wanted nothing to do with. It was plastered across the billboards and the memes of the day, the papers and the weekly or monthly news propaganda pieces held at theaters that all Americans attended religiously, that the Japanese, in attacking Pearl Harbor, had awakened a sleeping giant. Well, I submit that the only thing that happened after Pearl Harbor was the sleeping giant was spoon-fed a fictitious dream, a false picture of reality, in order to glean public backing for America to join in the carnage of World War II. And the propaganda worked like a charm, or the hypnotic suggestion worked like a charm. At any rate, anyone who's read Shin Shi's The Art of War will understand why political and military leaders absolutely must have the backing of the people to carry out any sort of military campaign, and for a number of reasons. Whether the people backing the politicians or military leaders truly understand the circumstances is irrelevant, so long as they support the efforts is the crux of the issue. So instead of awakening a sleeping giant, the Pearl Harbor attacks, after which the giant continued to slumber, with a particular group of people influencing the giant's subconscious thought processes, effectively remote controlling the sound asleep giant into backing a totally unjust cause for war, which was certainly not in line with the official narrative of Pearl Harbor, which has all sorts of problems with the official story, again, a topic for another discussion, and was not in line with our ideals, which under no uncertain terms is intended for America not to involve itself in foreign conflicts. 9/11 was the false flag Pearl Harbor of our day, and most people in the world understand that the official narrative surrounding 9/11 was nowhere near in line with what actually occurred that day, just over 14 years ago. 99% of the world, myself included, totally fell for the hoax, hook, line, and sinker, and it wasn't until several years later that I began to question the official narrative and ultimately have arrived at the conclusion that it was an inside job, at least foreknowledge of which was prevalent. All of this is related at the highest levels, I can assure you. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that well-meaning, well-intentioned people, or masses of people, can be misled into believing a completely contrived narrative based on official presentations of data, which in many cases are so far removed from reality, it's a surprise they were able to pull it off. Now, these people, the advertisers and propagandists of the world, who now operate by proxy via big-budget motion pictures especially, have made it a science to manufacture consent for even the most outlandish ideas or laws, creating the illusion these crazy theories are sensible or natural, when in fact they are in direct contradiction to the evidence, and in many cases contrary to the well-being of the population at large. I submit that the sleeping giant spoken of in World War II after Pearl Harbor was sound asleep then, and to this day remains perpetually induced into a semi-lucid, semi-rational state, following the suggestions of those clever men at the top. Even to this day, many decades after World War II has come and gone, that giant still slumbers, with all sorts of wild illusions pumped into its mind, our collective conscious speaking more literally, the war to end all wars, which placed unbalanced power into the hands of specific world powers, including the U.S. and Russia, and, of course, the new-founded Israel, with the planned purpose of creating the MADD, or MAD, or mutually assured destruction, where, it's a paradigm of the Cold War, which involved the public believing we could all be destroyed in a flash of nuclear explosions should the politics between the US and Russia go south. What a perfect mind control device for the population. Everyone in a constant, subconscious state of fear and panic, all over a paranoid delusion implanted into their minds by the mass media outlets, all the while the Russians and the US leaders were in obvious collusion to keep the public mind away from the southernmost regions of the world as their top, number one priority, although they would never admit it, of course. As preposterous as this may seem at first glance, when you study the U.S. and Russia's actions after 1950's Antarctic Treaty, it becomes apparent that all world military powers have been in collusion for one specific goal. However, they certainly do not advertise this to their citizens. All the rest of the geopolitics is just window dressing, a dog and pony show, or a distraction for the minds of the masses to focus their energy on a fearful doomsday scenario here on planet Earth, when in reality the governments have secretly been working together to ensure this awesome giant continues to slumber, with a false reality perpetually and increasingly pumped into the collective mind via the television, movies, news, and yes, even the once honorable institution of science, using cutting-edge psychology, hypnotic suggestion, and subliminal programming, ultimately mass hypnosis, as a primary directive and a means to an end. All scientists, including and especially the theoretical physicists who should not be considered scientists, since they operate solely on what they can imagine, with utter disregard for what they can prove or demonstrate, and simply parrot what they've been told since they were very young, although contrary to common sense and careful observation, they never stop to consider what is true or correct in reality, only what is asserted to them by figures of scientifical authority, the pillars of whose theorem are never dared be questioned by the lowly student who knows flip all about science, going into the course with the bona fide professor of theoretical physics, or better termed bona fide nunner of nonsensical flights of fancy, with a total disregard for physical reality 101. With all due respect, science is supposed to be a rational, skeptical process involving rigorous testing, retesting, and a constant goal of expanding our understanding of physical reality with increasing orders of magnitude, as the process is intended to build upon certain foundational pillars or premises which must be assumed as fact or taken for granted in order to progress through the more complex stages of rationale, finally arriving at the ultimate truth according to the disproven physically impossible flights of fancy published as proven facts, thanks to our contemporary theoretical physicists piggybacking on the nonsensical ramblings of Newton, assuming relativity to explain all the world's mysteries, yet relativity falls utterly short upon close scrutiny. The men who determine that what is possible and what is, on the other hand, impossible are ultimately in control of your mind, whether you know it or like it or not. Science is supposedly a process to tame an unquenchable search for ultimate truth, you see. However, we have all based the foundation of our understanding of the physical universe upon fundamental pillars which amount to a series of false, nonsensical assumptions being perpetually asserted to every last human in the civilized world and beyond for hundreds of years. These pillars are, of course, the most preposterous lies, or at least total misunderstandings of reality due to the limited human filter of viewing reality, and in spite of these lies and misunderstandings being amongst the most ridiculous ever considered. These lies and misunderstandings, when scrutinized with any degree of skepticism, actually fall apart like a house of cards, yet the extremely intelligent scientific minds of our time are too busy with their outrageous flights of fancy to simply stop and consider whether or not the assumptions they base their entire paradigm on are correct, or even physically plausible, or just downright wrong.
What is gravity?
You have no idea. Okay, next question. That's the best I can do there. I think that's a good start. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know.
So did I accidentally ask a deeper question than I meant to?
Yeah, no, you were meant to ask deep questions in life. So to say, what is it? I think Einstein, in an Einsteinian answer, we would say gravity is the curvature of space and time. And objects will follow the curvature of space-time, and we interpret that as a force of gravity. That's probably the best answer I can give to a what is gravity question, or why is there gravity. I can also say that Einstein noted that matter tells space how to curve, space tells matter how to move.
Say that again.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is. No, I want to get that. I like that. That's a t-shirt.
Matter and energy will curve the fabric of space.
Okay.
And it's that curvature that tells other matter how to move in the curvature of space itself. And so Einstein juxtaposed those in a poetic phrase where he said, matter tells space how to curve. Did I get that right?
I wouldn't
Matter
know.
tells space how to curve. Space tells matter how to move. It's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
A melon doesn't bounce. Now the reasons for that are quite complex actually, and has a lot more energy when it hits the ground. It has to dissipate it in some way, and it dissipates it by exploding. And if I lick my finger and wet it, then I can pick up a piece of paper. I can hold it up against the downward pull of gravity. That's because the force of electromagnetism is important. In fact, it's the cohesive forces between water molecules and the molecules that make up my finger and the molecules that make up the paper.
In March, scientists announced the discovery of gravitational waves and evidence for the Big Bang. Today, they're not so sure. Space producer for Discovery News, and like many of our viewers, I'm a little confused. You may remember the video when Trace and I got very excited about gravitational waves embedded in the cosmic microwave background radiation, known simply as the CMB. We even sacrificed a whole pack of balloons to help explain that historic discovery. But now the team of researchers have urged caution about their original announcement after other space scientists began doubting their conclusions. It's thought the CMB is the weak echo of the Big Bang that happened nearly 14 billion years ago. Using a telescope located at the South Pole called Bicep 2, the researchers concluded that they were indeed looking at the signature of gravitational waves. This discovery proved the inflationary model of the Big Bang and even provided possible evidence for quantum gravity. These are all amazing discoveries. Unfortunately, there was one problem. Well, there were two problems actually. Galactic dust fills the Milky Way, and when looking out into the cosmos, this dust gets in the way, creating its own polarization signature. Astronomers need to correct for this dusty interference in order to find gravitational waves in the CMB. The European Space Agency has a space telescope called Planck that is also looking for evidence of gravitational waves in this Big Bang echo. Planck can also create an accurate map of this galactic dust because it's surveying the entire sky. When the Bicep 2 astronomers corrected for this dust, they only had very limited data from Planck. So according to the critics, they made insufficient corrections for the now famous polarization that was more likely caused by dust and not by gravitational waves. The second problem is that the researchers made the groundbreaking announcement before they published their work to a scientific journal. But this month, the Bicep 2 team finally published their work. Although they stand by their research, they also pointed out that dust could have interfered with their results. To remove the galactic dust interference, they need to wait until Planck releases detailed measurements later this year. So now the big question is, why the heck did the Bicep 2 team make an announcement of this magnitude before they'd even published? Well, it could be argued that the Bicep 2 team were just so confident in their analysis, they were just enthusiastic to get the word out. Sometimes in science, it's important to make a big announcement first to secure your name in the history books before any competing scientists can do the same. Or perhaps they just wanted to make their results known to the scientific community before publishing, so their conclusions could be checked. So they may have been premature, but it's important to remember that the Bicep 2 findings could still be real, and gravitational waves and the theories behind the Big Bang are just as valid today as they were in March. Right or wrong, it's fascinating to see the scientific process play out in a very public stage. I just hope for the Bicep 2 scientists' sake that the upcoming Planck data proves they were right. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below and keep coming back for more science videos every day of the week.